Thank you very much. Presidents, ministers, excellencies, fellow governors, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad to be able to welcome you on behalf of the Austrian Central Bank. And we are very proud that you have chosen Vienna again for your gathering. And I'm also very glad to have this prominent group of economists, bankers from the Arab world, because we have traditionally very good and very stable relationships with this region. And I want to underline the word stable, because I myself, in one of my former incarnations, I had been also CEO of a private bank in Austria, and I will never forget that I myself experienced that when some problems arise, our Arab partners have been stable and trustworthy friends. And this is something that has taught me a good lesson, and a lesson I'm very much prepared also to tell to others of my friends. As governor of the Austrian Central Bank, I'm also member of the Governing Council of the European Central Bank, and also a member of the Governing Council of the Bank of International Settlement in Basel. And I had great joy just last weekend to meet some of my fellow governors, and also Dr. Manay, Al-Manay here in Basel. So I want to give you a short perspective first on some of the European situation, and then some few words on Austria. Concerning the European situation, it's quite obvious that, of course, this also had been affected by the big economic crisis. And we are now seeing that we have different stages of solving this crisis. With regard to the financial sector and the monetary side, we have achieved stability, not least through the efforts of the European Central Bank. Where we still have huge problems, this is the real economy. The Europe, EU and the Euro area, this year 2013, will have negative growth rates of about 0.6%. And this concentrated on some of our southern member countries with much too high unemployment rates, and especially youth unemployment. And this clearly is a huge challenge that we have to deal with. I want to be very clear. It is a challenge where central banks can be helpful, but they cannot, for them alone, provide the solution. So, as also my friend Stepic has said, of course, this is a challenge for policy, this is a challenge for fiscal policy, for structural policies. But anyhow, I think what is a message I'd like to share with you is that Europe is going to use this challenge for a number of reforms. And it is, and many of you may have experienced this yourself, that a time of crisis can be used for reforms. You know this famous saying, never waste a good crisis. So we are trying really to make this crisis productive. And one of the concepts in this case is the perspective of a European banking union, which is very simple in the idea, because we do have already now a common European financial market in the EU. And it's quite obvious that this common European financial market also needs a common field of banking regulation. So this is basically what it's all about. It has three main elements. The one element is to have a single supervisory mechanism in Europe. The second element in that sense is to have a European resolution, pan-European resolution mechanism. And the third element is to have a pan-European deposit insurance scheme. Just now, we are working on the first pillar of this concept, the single European supervisory mechanism. It is the ECB that is entrusted with taking up this responsibility. Of course, not for the thousands of banks we have in Europe, but for the about 130 biggest banks in Europe, which anyhow comprise about 80% of all banking assets in Europe. You can imagine this is quite a very specific and challenging task. The first step to be done is that we want to have a clear picture of the situation of the European banks. And therefore the first step, and this is something that will come up at the end of this year or at the start of next year, is a European asset quality review of European banks. Very much, for instance, like on the model as it has been also, let's say, in the US, really to provide a quite objective situation of the statutes, because this is, I think, also a very important element to increase the trust in the banking system. We do have a strong, efficient, and I think also economically sound banks in Europe. We do have, of course, like everywhere, also some problem banks and problem areas. I think it's very important really to show the strengths and therefore to increase the credibility of the system. Of course, this is not an easy task, and we are just working on this. And the perspective is that, let's say, mid-2014 or second half of 2014, this European system of banking supervision should become operative. The second step, the resolution regime, is something that is, of course, still even more complicated. But just this last night, the European finance ministers in ECOFIN made a breakthrough in having now a clear concept of a resolution mechanism. That means that you have a clear hierarchy. Who has to bear the burden if problems arise? And again, I think this is a clear message. This is something that should increase the credibility of the system, and of course also mean that not in all cases it's the taxpayer who has to pay the bill if something is a problem. So this is some step-by-step approach, and at the end of the day, I think we will be able to show that we have a very clear, well-based European banking system. If I may just add some few remarks on Austria. We are a small country, and fortunately we are, let's say, among the better functioning countries in Europe. We do have a positive growth rate. We have still one of the fastest growing economies in Europe. Also, of course, we are not an island, but as we have a rather differentiated customer base, if you want to call it, because we are oriented towards Western Europe, but of course we also have a strong connections with Central and Eastern Europe, which are still the fastest growing parts of Europe in total. So the economy is moving along. We are in the European Union the country with the lowest unemployment rate, and especially with the lowest youth unemployment rate. This is something we are really very proud about. And we have a sound and well-working banking system. We have, of course, two medium-sized, one small, one medium-sized problem banks. This is where we are working at. But our big banks, and my friend Herbert Steppich is representing one of them, are sound, well-functioning, and if I may say so, as we also have the responsibility for banking supervision, well-supervised banks. So I think this is a basis for stable growth. It is based on an economy that has quite a strong base in technology, where we have a very well-educated workforce, where we are open internationally. And I think that those of you who have been working in Austria and who have companies in Austria will have experienced that this is a country where it is open also for labor coming from outside, for qualified labor. So I think that it is an interesting place to look at, and we have very good experiences with Arab investments that we have, and we have strong Arab investments in Austria, and we have very good experiences with this. So therefore, feel at home here in Vienna. It is a country where you are most welcome. It is a country that is open to international cooperation. It is a small country, and therefore we do not have any imperial ambitions. We just want to be friends. And as such, be welcome. Thank you very much for coming.